Hello and welcome everyone to this demo session on SAP UI5 and Fiori training with Business Application Studio and SAP WebIDE. In this demo session, we will look at an introduction of SAP UI5 technology and try to understand how to get started with SAP UI5 development. In the next 40 hours of this course, we will learn all the core concepts of UI5 development using MVC architecture and also the latest development tools, which includes Business Application Studio and WebIDE. Thank you so much for joining this live demo session today with me, Anubhav. And I will take you through this next 40 minutes about the introduction of UI5 and creating a very simple Fiori application in one go. So let's first understand the persona and the expectation. Who is this course for? So if you are one of the application developer, or a programming expert, definitely this course makes sense for you. As you can see, 4 different personas over here to be able to relate yourself with a practical character. So first persona is Emma Carter. She is a UX designer and she would like to start learning how to develop applications from scratch. So if you are a UX designer and would like to venture into core development with programming, then this course makes sense for you. The second persona here is Fred Smith. He is an application developer working on ABAP technology or any other SAP technology like BW, Portal, BSP, WebDyn Pro, and he would like to now learn the latest SAP UI5 and Fiori technology to build applications on ECC and S4HANA. It also makes sense to join this course. Then comes is Jonathan D. He's a technical consultant working in industry with other UI technology like, for example, AngularJS, React.js, and he would like to become a UI developer with SAP UI5. Finally, Stella Ross. She's a fresher with no experience. She would like to aspire to become a full stack developer in SAP area. So the first milestone for her to achieve and gain the expertise on building UI applications with UI5 framework. Or if you are one of these personas, then definitely you can relate yourself that this course is making sense for you or not. Looking at the roadmap for this course, what is that you're going to expect at the end of this course? We will have this course divided into 4 phases. The phase 1 starts with fundamentals, which includes core concepts of UI development, including the open source technologies like HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery. Of course, you will also learn the development tools which are used to develop applications, which includes Business Application Studio and WebIDE. In the phase 2, we'll start with SAP UI5 development using UI5 framework and MVC architecture. We will talk about the core concepts of UI5 SDK, the software development kit, the required tooling setup, and also the core concepts like a model, view, and controller. We'll discuss about different binding types, binding modes, and core controls. Along with that, important concepts like formatters and fragments. In phase 3 of this course, we'll start Fiori development. We'll understand the Fiori UX guidelines and see how to develop master detail and worklist application with transactional capabilities using SAP Mobile Library. This also includes the important topics like component.js, router, route match handler, manifest JSON. Finally, we will learn how to expose your existing ERP system data via OData services on Netweaver Gateway, both with Central Hub or embedded scenarios. We will learn development of crude methods and also consuming them in the Fiori applications end to end. Finally, we will learn how to deploy this application to SAP system and will be able to consume this application from Launchpad at the end of this course. So that's a brief about the roadmap. Of course, you can find the detailed course content on anubhavtrainings.com. With that, what can you expect in today's demo session? So we will be creating our first UI5 page. It's a one-pager application today. So we'll see how to access the development environment, understand the very basics, Then we'll start with developing a one-pager UI5 app. And finally, we will see how to test our application in the web browser. So for today's demo session, I will use and showcase both the development tools, which is Business Application Studio on cloud platform, and also the WebIDE. Please do not overwhelm with the definition of these tools, because in our very next class, I will explain how to set up these tools yourself in your system or get access to these tools from your local machine. In today's demo session, to keep it simple, I'm not covering introduction of the development tools, but we will just look at the overall perspective of how do we develop applications. Before we start, let's quickly move over to introduction of SAP UI5. What is it all about and why it's so popular now? And why it's extremely important for anyone who willing to become a developer in SAP world. How come SAP UI5 helps you? So SAP UI5 is a framework. Now what's a framework? A framework is a collection of libraries. What's a library? A library is a collection of classes. What's a class? A class is a collection of methods, attributes, events, and aggregations. Basically, relationship of a class with other classes is called aggregation. So, SAP have developed a very powerful framework which allows you to develop applications, and these applications can run on web browser. Not that all. Once you code this application, you can run the same application on any browser, any platform, and any device. And that's what makes UI5 different from existing SAP web technologies like WebDyn Pro and BSP. And that is the reason more and more developers who are working as an ABAP consultant or SAP technical consultant are learning UI5. The reason is, in the past, you used to create dialog programs or Dyn Pros using call screen methods or create selection screen, or you would build a WebDyn Pro application, or you're building a VSP application or portal application for that matter, or a floor plan manager application with WebDyn Pro. All of this now slowly getting converted to UI5 and Fiori applications. Please note this course includes both UI5 and Fiori. So UI5 is acting as a framework for the development. We use SAP UI5 framework. Now, of course, there is no one-click auto conversion of any applications which you use today to Fiori application, but it's something which requires a development effort. And that's the motivation of attending this training on SAP UI5. Now, as I already mentioned, this is a framework which is a collection of libraries, classes, and each class contains so many of these methods, attributes, and events. So if you look at some of the important libraries which this framework includes, one of the prominent library is called sap.m library. This is the library, we call it as mobile library, and this library has so many classes. So for our today's demo session, I'll just drill down to very minute details in terms of just the focus on the class which we are going to use. So I will be just using a button class. So this button class is part of SAP-M library, and SAP-M library is part of UI5 framework. Now, if you would like to develop an application, you have to first load the framework, load the library, and then load the class. And of course, then this class includes so many methods, properties, and events. So for example, we will have a text property to give the label for the button, and we have a press event, which is what we will use to be able to fire the logic which will get triggered when the button is pressed. So if you see, this is the level which we will be using today. It's a very straightforward, plain vanilla case. Of course, how do you read this framework? How do you read these libraries? What are all the other controls we have? What are all the different methods, properties, and attributes you can find inside a class? All of this will cover in chapter number 5, where we will talk about UI5 SDK. But for keeping it short and simple for the demo, I have just going to go through in this flow. Now, when you want to develop an application, the very first thing you need to do is load this framework. So SAP provides a CDN, content distribution network, to load this framework from the internet directly. The URL is http sapui5.hana.ondemand.com/resources/SAP UI core.js. This is the library, or this is the address where the library is or the framework is placed, and we can load the framework from this place. So the syntax which we use to load this is using a special tag called script tag. So we're going to use a script tag to be able to load this framework. Now, while loading this framework, we will also mention which library we would like to load. For that, we will use a property called src. Use data SAP UI libs. This is the property I'm going to use to load the library from this framework. The framework includes so many libraries. We don't want to load all of them, because if I unnecessarily load everything, then it is going to take a lot of time. So to save the time, we can specify exactly which library we're willing to load. Now, once that's done, in the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to create an object of this class. To create an object, the syntax which we use is new keyword. Just like any other programming language, you need to create an object, and you use new class name. So here we will say sap.m, which is the library, and this includes a button class. So that's my class name. Each control actually can call it as a UI control or a class in context of programming. So basically, button is a UI control. When you display a button, it will display a button on the screen. So to display a button on the screen, you have to create an object of this class. And as a next step, you have to provide these properties and events. Properties are nothing but attributes which you specify to control the behavior. And press is an event here. Event is what we specify to be able to give the logic. So we will always put curly braces, and inside that we just give the property name or event name, a colon, the value. So this is the syntax we also use parallelly. So as you can see, these are all the bare minimum things to get started with the development. Now, whenever you start developing anything in context of programming world, we always have some tooling, some tools we use. There are a variety of options when it comes to developing UI5 applications. These options includes Eclipse. You can use Eclipse. You can use SAP Business Application Studio, which is the latest development tool for UI5 applications. You can use SAP WebIDE. It's a web browser-based tooling. And then you can also use third-party tools like Atom.io. You can use maybe .NET Visual Studio code editor. So there are lots of tools which we can use. Basically, the code does not change. Code remains still always the same. You just use the same code, but it's just that development tools are of variety of types. So in today's demo session, for simplicity, I'm just going to show you two tools, which is BAS tool, Business Application Studio, and also the Web IDE, of course, is a glimpse. You will also see in this demo session how this code is interportable. Interportable means you will have one data porting to the second one, and second one. You can basically develop a project, and this project is interportable between these development tools, because ultimately they are development tools alone, right? So that's also we will be able to see. So that gives you a clue of you can actually develop anywhere, wherever you like. Yeah, not don't be biased with the development tool while it comes to the development, because the same code works everywhere. So let's switch it over to the system, and we'll build a very simple one-page application where we'll create a button. And on click of a button, I would like to give a small message on the screen. So I'll switch it over to my development tool. So this is the first tool called Business Application Studio, and it's available on SAP Cloud Platform Cockpit. So I can just switch over to the development tool. It gives you an experience exactly similar to what you see on a locally installed Visual Studio. Yeah. So this includes now something called dev space. As you can see, I've already created a dev space, but don't worry. The complete onboarding which is required for you guys to be able to learn from scratch is what we will do it from very first session. So our very first session, this is just a demo today, But our very first session tomorrow is when we are going to set up this development tool as a fresher. So you may be an absolute fresher, absolute beginner, don't worry. We're going to cover all of these as part of the course. So for now, I'll just switch it over to my workspace. And this is where I can start developing a project. So just imagine you have a computer. Yeah. So maybe just show you a basics of this development tool. This is the bash we are discussing right now. So just imagine you have a computer at your home, and now you will be using this computer to be able to develop your first application, right? So just imagine that we have our local machine. So this is our hardware. On top of hardware, you have an operating system. Now, of course, you can't run just like a C programming code. If I just create a notepad file and I write a C code, let's say int of I and printf I, it is not going to work just on a notepad file. You definitely need something in the middle, which is what we call it as C compiler, to convert this code necessarily to what something operating system can understand. On the same way, we need also a development tool. So C compiler is what compiles the code. At the same time, you use C editor to be able to also write the code, which has integrated with the C compiler, right? So similarly, if you want to develop a UI5 application, you also need a development tool and an engine which can understand and convert that logic to the what operating system or what browser can understand. And that's where the concept of the development studio, business application studio, comes into picture. The bash is that development tool where you can actually write all the code. And this piece of code, when you submit, it's submitted, of course, to the browser. So here you have, of course, you submit your code to the browser. And now this browser will have this UI5 framework loaded in the browser already, which understand the code which you've written. And this is what interacts with the operating system. So that's how exactly what we typically do. So we will have business application studio where we'll write our code. We run this code directly on a browser, and this browser will then talk to OS and hardware, of course. So here we need to load the UI5 as well. But at the same time, this bash tool is also needs to run on operating system. So there has to be some operating system, there has to be some hardware where this tool itself will run, right? So that operating system, that hardware, this is what we have, a virtual machine into the cloud where this bash is tool is running. So that's what exactly I'm doing there. If you see, I open SAP Cloud Platform, and there I'm running this virtual machine, and that's where my business application studio is running. So just understand that there is a computer on the internet, and on that computer this tool is installed. I'm just getting an access to that over the browser. So now what I'll do is I'll just create a folder inside that computer. So for that, I just go to terminal here, and you can see I'm in the terminal, and you can do ls command to also see the directories which are there. And you can also go to, let's say, projects directory. And now I can create a new folder, let's say mkdir, make directory, and I will say Anubhav demo. So now I've created a new folder. If I do an ls, I can see there are a variety of directories which I've created in the past. And the one which I've recently created was Anubhav demo over here. So let me go inside this directory, cd space Anubhav demo. And now I can generate a complete UI5 project with the templating tools also. If you don't want it to do it using command line, what you can also do is you can click on this button called Open Workspace, and then you can see all the folders which are created. The one which we just created was this. We select and say Open. So basically, I'm accessing a folder of that remote computer where the bash tool is installed. So there is somewhere a machine, a computer is running on the internet, and my bash tool is giving me an access to write and read on that operating system folder. So that's what is happening here. So let's go back, and now here we will create a new folder inside, and I'm going to name it as web app because it's a web application. So that's a naming convention we use. So remember, in this whole training, we are not just going to learn the development, but we will also see the best practices which a developer must follow to comply to the required guidelines before you really ship the product. Yeah. Now coming back, let's create a new file. Name this file as index.html. So you can name it anything you like, but to begin with, I'll start with an index.html file. So what is an HTML file? It's a file which browser can understand directly. So tomorrow I can feed it to browser and browser will understand this. Now, if you really go back quickly to our previous slide, what we saw there, that we need a UI5 framework to be loaded, then we need library to be loaded, and then we can use the button object to be created. So first step is these two. We will load the UI5 framework and we load the library. This process of loading UI5 framework and the library is called Bootstrap process. Okay, it's a very important interview question. What is Bootstrap? Bootstrap is a process of loading the UI5 framework and the UI5 library to be able to code on top of it. So let's come back. Any HTML document includes an HTML file, and this HTML file has two parts, header and body. Just like humans have head and body, we also have head and body in any HTML page. And you can see system is also kind of proposing me a nice code completion over here in the system. So I can just do that. I can also maybe come back and maximize this screen. So let me just go back now and write here the code to load this UI5 framework from the internet. So for that, we use a special command called script. So you can see system is also proposing us code completion. That's the benefit of this development tool. So we use script command and we say source, where is the UI5 framework to be loaded? And I'm going to grab this URL. I will also explain you in next session, where do we get this URL from? How does Anubhav know that this is the URL to load UI5 framework, so that you can yourself do that? And then we need to mention that what is the library. So data SAP UI libs, which library to load, and I say sap.m is the library I'm willing to load. At the same time, I will also mention UI theme. So if you have ever seen a Fiori application, typically you would see this little lighter blue color screen at the background. That comes because of the theme which we load. So theme gets you the color and the formatting. So I'm going to load SAP Blue Crystal theme. And next step is, that's it. We are done with loading the framework. Yeah. So now as a next step, we are going to also just quickly go back to the body and we put a classification property and we say this whole HTML content is represented by SAP body. I just save this and that's it. A very simple blank application with loading of UI5 framework is done. And we can now go back and just say, welcome to anubhavtrainings.com. Can just go back and execute this now right away. So you can right click here and say open with, and I say preview. So you will see now the system is going to load a preview for us right away right here, and we should be able to see exactly what we coded. So there you go. You can see now I'm getting my preview with a welcome to anubhavtrainings.com. And now you can also see that the background color of the entire page is little blue color. And that's because it's a testimony that our theme has been successfully loaded, which we were kind of trying to load from the UI5 framework. So the framework is loaded, the library is loaded. What next we wanted to do is just add a button control. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of this welcome. And I'm just going to give an ID to this div control. Div stands for division tag. It's an HTML tag. Don't worry. If you're not so comfortable with HTML, we have a dedicated chapters on basics of HTML, starting chapter 2 and 3 itself. So there I'll cover all the basics of HTML from scratch. Now I'm just going to give an ID here. So let's say Anubhav. Just save this up. And what next I'm going to do is create a script tag over here. Script tag. And inside this script tag, we're going to write all our code. The code is next is to create a button object and just pass the property text and press property. And on press of the button, we should show a pop-up. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's go back and we will write here var and new button control. So I can say btn, just a name. And I can say new sap.m library name and dot button object. And then we can say curly braces, give a text property out there, and just say welcome to UI5. And next I will say press, and I'll say function, just write a function. This is the code which you write to typically write the business logic. Of course, in our chapter number 11 and 12 will start with model view controller architecture, where we're going to separate it down, these bits and pieces of code in a proper files. We're not going to do the way things we are doing here in the demo, but we will have a segregation of application logic and the presentation logic separate. Now, I will just throw an alert pop-up and I'll say, welcome to Anubhav trainings. Just save that. Okay. Now, when I see the preview right now, nothing comes. The reason is I did not place my button, which I've created inside the body. The basic rule of an HTML content is the content which is kept in the body is only that content will be visible to the user. So we created an object, but we forgot to place this object inside the body. So as a next step, what I'm going to do now is to come down, and very next step, I'll say my button object. This is my class object. I can say, please place this button object and place it inside this element Anubhav. So element Anubhav is my canvas, and I'm drawing a portrait on that canvas. So just place that. And now we can just go back and retry the preview one more time. So you can right click, say open with, and say preview. And there you go. Awesome. You got your first button created with UI5 page. I mean, it's a very plain vanilla simple case. Of course, you can also launch this in a browser. So you just have to click on open source, and you can also see the code here. But if you would like to launch this in a browser, you can also right click here, go to inspect, and just take the URL from here. You can see the URL. I can just copy this URL and directly open another browser tab to launch this in a browser. And of course, now when you click on the button, you can see the same message which we have coded as an application logic for the button is getting displayed. A fairly simple and easy way to get started with the development tool and your first UI5 page, one page application. Now, as a next step, I would like to showcase also the interportability. So no matter which tool is your company using, we will be learning both of the tools as part of this training. So it's both, the code is going to remain same, whether you use Bash or use WebIDE. I still got a request from many of you that, Anubhav, my company is using WebIDE tool to be able to develop UI5 app. The developers who are sitting next to me, they are saying that they will be using WebIDE and they're already using it. I'm already comfortable. I've started UI5 development with WebIDE and I'm comfortable with it. Would you be able to show WebIDE as well? Yes, why not? We will actually see both in this course. So now I will show you downloading this project from Bash and uploading it in the WebIDE and running the same. It's going to essentially produce the same result. So the code never differentiate between the tool. So code remains code. So I'm going to right click and export this web app folder. So you have an option to export this over here. So let's see. So we have this download button. You can press that and you will see that it has downloaded my web app.tar file on my local machine. As the next step, I will go up to the WebIDE tool. This is how the WebIDE tool looks like, more or less the same flow of looks like any other development tool. How do you get this WebIDE? Don't worry about that. We'll discuss in a very next session. So that will also be able to set up WebIDE in your local machine. Now over here, I'm going to create the same lines a folder, and we can say my Anubhav demo. The zip file, right click, import file system, browse and select the zip file. And since it is zip file now, it's going to ask me an option to extract. I say okay. And there you go. You can see the web app folder with index.html page is created. Exactly the same code, no change. You can straight ahead, go ahead and execute this. And there you go. In your local machine, this project is working fine. It's the same project which is interportable. So if you have a confusion about whether to use Bash or WebIDE, don't worry. We will definitely use both the tools as part of this training. So it's not really that We are biased by one particular tool. You will be using both of them, and the code never changes. Code still remains as it is, whether you code there or here. It's just a development tool, a little bit of experience with the development tool, which will change actually. So now it's time for some of the quick questions from many of you. These are some frequently asked questions before we start this course. What will be the duration of the training, and are there any prerequisites? Good question. So the duration of this training is 40 hours, and there are absolutely no prerequisite to learn UI5 and Fiori. You are a college pass out, you can learn UI5 Fiori actually, as you saw already in the user persona. So you just need to have a basic programming skills required, and you should have interest to code actually. That's all you need to be able to become a UI5 developer. The timing does not suit me. Can I go with video mode? Of course, you can opt for video mode of training. Every class which we conduct, it will get recorded. You can watch later point of time the videos, or you can also go my already completed batch with all the videos which are already in there. You can fast track your learning with pure video mode training as well, and ask your doubts via email. What tool do we use to learn? So as I mentioned already, we're going to use both tools, whether it is BAS, Business Application Studio, or WebIDE tool. In our next class, we will see how to install these tools in our machine or get access to these tools over the cloud from scratch. That's going to be our very next class, where we'll see how to get access to these development tools. What about the server access for practicing? So for practicing, we would don't need any server as such, but at least just to practice OData, we would need server. And that will be required on last 10 classes, not at the very beginning. So at that point of time, I'm going to explain you about the options for the server, where you will be able to also build the OData services with all the CRUD operations. So right now, you should not worry about that. I'm going to have a dedicated session only on server to explain you what the server requirements is and where do you get it from. Will you also cover real-time scenarios? Yes, we will be developing end-to-end Fiori application and also connect these end-to-end application with the backend system with OData service, and also deploy these applications so that it can be shipped to the production system. I'm new to SAP UI5. Can I learn? Yes, you can learn UI5. What just you need is a basics of programming. Other than that, you really don't need any prerequisite as such, because HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery, I'm going to cover as part of the course. One important note that you do not need Java programming experience to learn WebIDE or to learn UI5 at all. There is zero Java required. Now you may see this word JavaScript, then you say why? So Java and JavaScript are two different programming languages. They are completely different in their nature, usage, and purpose. We will cover JavaScript as part of this course, and Java is absolutely not required for this. If I miss the class, how can I refer? So every class we will record it, and later point of time, you can actually go ahead and watch the recording of the class. Even you attend it, you will still get the recording access. What's the process to enroll? It's very simple. Just drop us an email on contact@anubhavtrainings.com and you will be enrolled for the course. For more questions, you can visit always anubhavtrainings.com/frequently asked questions, FAQs, and that's how you can get thought about all the questions. Now, with that, thank you so much for attending this demo session with me today. I hope you enjoyed it. The basic idea, you've also got an overall introduction of how are we going to develop. One promise from my side will be a no copy paste. Most of the training which you attend over the internet, you see trainers will be doing a copy paste of code, showcasing the output and running away. That's not how we will be covering this course. We will write every single line of code in front of you so that you can understand the same. So with that, thank you so much once again for being part of this live demo session on YouTube. And I will see you in the very next session. Thank you so much and goodbye.